let's go ahead and get started here. Let's start with an introduction. I'm Dimple Ajmera, serving you as the chair of the Environment, Engagement, and Equity Committee. Committee members, please proceed.
Braxton Winston, serving at large and committee member.
Good morning, Renee Johnson, District 4, Vice Chair and Committee Member.
Staff.
Good morning, Sarah Hazel, Chief Sustainability and Resiliency Officer, and we'll go to my left. Katie Riddle Rhodes, Strategic Energy Action Plan Project Manager.
Victoria Johnson, City Manager's Office.
Phil Rieger, Director of the Department of General Services.
Terry Bradley with Community Relations, also the City of Charlotte's ADA Coordinator.
Rebecca Hefner, Housing and Neighborhood Services.
Good morning, council members. I'm Willie Ratchford with Community Relations.
Donata Jackson, Office of Constituent Services.
And then I'll let you know some other folks who are in the room. We have John Thigpen, Climate Advisor, and Heather Bullock, who works in the Office of Sustainability and Resilience, and Federico Rios, who will be joining us at the table here in a moment.
Okay. Oh, great. The whole village is here to support the council. Thank you all so much. So today we have a full agenda with 3 important items, highlights from our CEAP, action plan work in 2021, an update on our ADA program, and our continued work on our equity in governance framework. So before I hand it over to Sarah to dive into the first item, I just want to highlight a few things. While it may seem like we have been doing this work for a long time, we really only got started with the CEAP about 3 years ago. And we know that we cannot afford to slow down now with the reality of climate change and the impacts on the health of our community at risk. But I do think it is important to take stock of what we have been able to accomplish so far. So we heard that our first CATS bus arrived at the end of 2021. Our electric first bus arrived at the end of 2021 and are now on our streets. We heard that from Catherine at our last meeting, which is really exciting. And here are a few more items that I'm particularly excited about, and that you'll hear more about it as well. 2021 marked the first year the city included information about CEAP in our bond offering referendum. So sustainability and addressing the climate change is becoming an increasingly high focus for investors, and we are demonstrating its importance. So, so when we talk about the budget impact, environment sustainability has a direct impact to everything we do, especially budget. Also, we are leading the way with electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We own and operate 41% of all the EV chargers in our city. And I think that's something we ought to be proud of. This demonstrates our leadership in the community. And this last year, Charlotte was named most improved city in the American Council for an energy efficiency economy clean energy scorecard. And we moved up in ranks from 65 to 42 out of 100. And this all has happened in past 1 year. So this shows in just a few short years of strategic efforts, we are starting to join the ranks of cities that have had low carbon city goals for a decade and more. So all of this work we have just started. However, we have made great strides, and our staff does deserve a lot of kudos from us. So thank you, Sarah, and your team. Thank you, Catherine. Now I'll turn it over to Sarah to walk us through our first item and the report.
Thank you so much, Chair Ajmera. So actually, I'm going to pass the baton to Phil Rieger, General Services Director. Then Kitty Rhodes will jump in, and I will close us out.
Thank you, Sarah. And good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee members, colleagues. I'm Phil Rieger, Director of General Services, And many might be asking, why is the Director of General Services kicking off a presentation like this? Because it may not be common knowledge that our Office of Sustainability and Resiliency is organized under the General Services Department. So just wanted to provide a little context. That's not an accident. Much of the work that we're doing around carbon reduction is a great collaboration between our Sustainability and Resiliency Office, but also with our fleet maintenance department or divisions, our building maintenance divisions, and our construction groups that actually build buildings. And so you can see there's great synergy as we think about how we manage energy amongst all the divisions within General Services. Of course, we wouldn't be able to do our work as well without the collaboration and cooperation of all the other departments as well. So what we're going to present today is the 2021 report. This is the third report that we have published related to our progress with the CAP. It really does demonstrate collaboration among not just General Services, but all departments. Just to highlight a few things that we've done, the policies and programs and the way we measure is extraordinarily important. And in an organization like ours, it's very complex. And I believe as a part of this report, we'll also be publishing the first ever facilities benchmarking study, which is a great accomplishment for not only sustainability and resiliency, but for the city as well. It will help us manage our energy usage in a way that we've not been able to manage that. You can't manage what you don't measure. And so we're really excited about that. And so let me go ahead and not steal Katie Rhodes' thunder and turn it over to her. Katie's been a member of our team for a long time. She's sort of part of the glue that makes all this stick together. And so Katie's going to walk you through the report, and just real excited for her to do that. So Katie, take it away.
Great, thanks, Phil. You can advance. So, as we mentioned, after 3 years of foundational efforts since the CAP's adoption, the 2021 report really demonstrates the significant action, policy implementation, and council's investments towards a healthy, equitable, and low-carbon future. And this report will be published by next week. And because this is a comprehensive report of 2021, there's a lot of information here that you, council, have already seen. But for today's session, just want to point out a couple of new tidbits of information. And I hope that you'll see throughout this report that we're making major progress, still a lot of work to be done, but in many efforts, and especially those efforts that we're doing for the first time, we are really leading the example in the community thanks to council's investments and prioritization. And that's a key strategy of the CAP, is leading by example for all of our community members. So, as you all know, but always worth mentioning, the CAP has two major goals. The first one is striving to source 100% of municipal energy use in our buildings and fleet from zero carbon sources by 2030. And then our second major carbon emissions reduction goal is striving to become a low carbon city by 2050. As I mentioned, that first 2030 goal is the city, the municipal organization, leading by example for the community. So Charlotte has made significant progress towards that 2030 goal of powering our buildings with zero carbon energy by 2030. And we've been able to make that significant progress by following the strategies outlined in the CAP and applying council investments towards decarbonization. So to assess our progress towards this 2030 goal, we took our 2021 municipal buildings energy usage and overlaid that with our existing zero carbon energy, our future expected zero carbon energy, so then we could see where that zero carbon gap is towards our 2030 goal. So I want to point out that pink 18% pie slice right there as our zero carbon gap. That is our understanding that that is our gap we are trying to close, either through offsets or further investments to reach our 2030 goal. And so the remainder of the pie depicts our current or future expected zero carbon energy. And we were able to assess that by three major things. One of those is Duke Energy's current zero carbon grid mix, so that energy that we're pulling from the grid that's already zero carbon. The second thing is the future decarbonization of Duke Energy's grid mix. And we're able to understand that by Duke's stated climate goals as well. So that's what the future grid will also be decarbonized. And then the third piece that we are able to close our gap is our own municipal investments. So things like our large-scale solar project, the Green Source Advantage program, as well as on-site municipal energy and other energy efficiency measures in our building stock. So this shows that we've made a ton of progress. There's, like I said, still a lot to go, but we are definitely leading the way and finding new ways to close that zero carbon gap by following the Strategic Energy Action Plan. So this here shows our City of Charlotte municipal solar energy systems. Council, you've seen some of this information already, like our FY21 budgeted rooftop solar. But a new piece of information here is our FY22 budget that is funding the design of municipal solar at 5 more city locations. And as I mentioned with the last slide, this is a key strategy to continue to close our zero carbon gap to reach that 2030 goal. So we wanted to create a map and a visual for you all in the community to see where our current municipal solar energy systems are. Similarly, you've seen information about our electric vehicle charging infrastructure around the city. Councilmember Ajmira mentioned our exciting fact that of all the charging stations in Charlotte, the City of Charlotte has installed and manages 41% of those. And so up here and then in the report, you'll be able to see where all of those charging stations are located. And as I mentioned, you've seen our count of EV charging stations as well as how many are open to the public. But a cool fact that we found with our data as well is that of our city-owned public EV charging stations, over 2,000 unique drivers' vehicles, meaning over 2,000 different people and vehicles charge their car at least one time at one of those city-owned stations. So we hope to keep increasing that number as we continue to facilitate the electrification of fleet in our city.
Oh, can I just stop you right here?
Yes.
If you can go back to this, yeah, could you make this map a little bit bigger or?
So Ms.
So-
Ajmira, you on your own
Yeah.
screen, you can, blow it up.
Yes, I was trying to zoom it. One question that I have often see that comes up in our community when we talk about electric vehicle charging infrastructure, it's really the equity piece. You know, are we being equitable in ensuring that vehicle infrastructure, charging infrastructure is spread out throughout the city and not just in some parts? And I know we recently celebrated or did a ribbon cutting last month over off of Beatty's Ford area. So which dots I'm looking at in terms of the charging, electric vehicle charging infrastructure?
Chair Ajmira, I can take this one. So maybe it's helpful just to share sort of our approach right now to electric vehicle charging. So our first priority has been to facilitate charging for our fleet. So we can make sure that when we're making these fleet investments, that we have the charging infrastructure to stand it up. But where we are outpacing our fleet, receiving our EVs with our charging infrastructure, we open those up to the public. And so when we're locating charging on the whole, we're looking at how we can facilitate fleet electrification with a couple exceptions. So you noted one, which was a public-private partnership with Duke Energy, UNC Charlotte, a DOE grant, which is on Beatties Ford Road. And that was strategically located there in a corridor of opportunity because of a desire from some key community members to support electrification in general. And so that's an example of what you're describing and where we're really trying to use an equity lens. And I think the other just places where we're doing that, we have 4 solar-powered electric vehicle chargers that are off the grid, and we are locating those in corridors of opportunity. We have one at our fire station headquarters, or 2 right now, and then one also is at Camp North End, because we see that as a place where people can go and also walk around while they charge. So that's a partnership. There's also one at our North Point facility. So strategically, we're placing chargers that are only for public use, using that equity lens. But for the rest of those dots, we're really looking at how we can charge our fleet.
Got it. So this public-private partnership for public charging stations would be important for us to fill this void, because clearly, as when we look at our public infrastructure, it's just concentrated in Center City. We don't see much in South, even East, very little in North. And we need to change that. So I'm hoping that this public-private partnership, while we are getting our infrastructure up to speed to ensure that we have infrastructure for our fleet, we got to make sure that we incentivize electric vehicle use by having that infrastructure capacity throughout the city. And I would like to see a list of all the public charging stations. Is there a site where someone can take a look at all the public infrastructure?
We can provide you a list of all of the stations, all of the dots on here, and where they're actually located that are open to the public.
Yes.
Yes.
That would be very helpful.
Yep.
Yes. And I'd also like to see a plan, right? How do we spread that out throughout the city?
If I can just piggyback off Councilmember Ajmer's request for the list, if we can list the district that those stations are in, I think that would help us to really quantify or see where there are gaps, which areas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Since this, I guess, is relevant to the current slide before you go on, just to update the committee and staff and everybody out there. Last week was our congressional visit to D.C. And Mayor Pro Tem Eiselt, Councilmember Eggleston, and I went up to D.C. To present our legislative agenda. I was able to meet with Senator Burr, as well as Senator Tillis's office, as well as Congresswoman Adams. I was not there for Congressmember Bishop's meeting, but I was told it went equally as well. One of the items on our legislative agenda was for a continued congressional support for building out our electric vehicle charging infrastructure, specifically as it relates to available funding in the new infrastructure law, which there is a specific cutout for that, especially to support those public-private partnerships. Happy to report that all of our members of Congress that I supported, and like I said, I was told that Bishop went well as well. We're very supportive of that. Part of the ability to get that funding from the infrastructure law is going to be an equity lens. It has to meet, stand up to the muster of those prerequisites. So that is a hugely substantial, potentially hugely substantial bucket of resources that could and should be coming our way. I think it seems like we are all aligned on our federal delegation level for what the governor and our state delegation are prioritizing and the plans that we have. So I think if we keep pushing whatever list staff comes up with now, I think would be greatly expanded, once those appropriations are made, should we be awarded those things. So let's just keep pushing, and I think we're setting ourselves up to do some pretty great things when we get the resources in this specific area. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, some of our work we cannot meet our goals without the support from federal government. So, Mr. Winston, great point. We do need more resources for us to address our goals when it comes to electrifying our fleet and some of our other CEAP goals on energy generation. All right, we can move forward with the next slide.
As Katie is moving forward, I just will mention one more thing. I just want you all to remember, it's not a part of this presentation today. It is in the report that there is an electric vehicle charging component in the draft UDO, which also supports continuing more infrastructure in the city. So just one point to note, and I'll let Katie take it from here.
So you all have seen most of these electric vehicle fleet stats, but did just want to point out that with FY22 investments, which will include the 5 aviation battery electric buses and an 18 battery electric bus pilot with CATS, the city will have a total of 88 electric vehicles. And that picture in the bottom right-hand corner is one of our electric buses with CATS, which actually went into service last weekend. So not sure if anyone's seen that on the road yet, but that's a really exciting development there as well. Outside of fleet electrification, facilitating the rapid uptake of sustainable modes of transportation and increasing access to those zero carbon mobility options is really critical in helping to reach our CEAP goal, particularly our 2050 community-wide goal. Investments in a walkable, bikeable, and connected Charlotte reduces carbon emissions by reducing the need for single occupancy vehicle trips. And so within the report, you'll see a focus on these different mobility investments in 2021, including scooters, sidewalks, bike lanes, and transit. But something to point out today is our increase of all ages and ability cycling network. So this ensures that people of, like it says, all ages and abilities are able to use those bike lanes in a safe and effective way. And so at the end of 2021, that all ages and ability cycling network clocked in at over 14 miles and will continue to grow over the next many years. Equity is a key theme of the CEAP, and you can see it throughout all of our investments, but 2 projects and initiatives we wanted to highlight here. The first one, the pole vault pilot, which we already spoke about, which increases electric vehicle charging in corridors of opportunity, and is a partnership, like we said, with UNC Charlotte and Duke Energy and Central Iowa Regional Council. And it allows for, like I said, equitable charging access throughout the city as that expands. The second project I wanted to mention here is our Renewable Energy and Efficiency Workforce Training Program, which launched at the end of 2020, But over the course of 16 months, Renew graduated 86 residents from the program, and 73% of those graduates are now working full-time thanks to this training program. You all have seen the infographic to the left, just highlighting some investments, grants, and policies related to the CEAP, but did want to mention some exciting financing firsts. In FY21 and FY22, it was the first time the CEAP was included in the council-approved capital investment plan, which showcases council's commitment to long-term financing for the CEAP. And then in addition, as Councilmember Ajmira mentioned, 2021 was the first time the CEAP was mentioned in our bond offering documents. It's really critical to investors that we show our strategy and tell our story around a low-carbon future. More and more investors are very interested in hearing what borrowers are doing in this space, and so it shows all of the great work that we're doing to ensure a low-carbon future and mitigate that risk. As we had in our report last year, we'll also have it in this year's report, a page highlighting grants, awards, and rankings that came out in that calendar year. Two things we're excited about. You've heard about them both. The ACEEE City Scorecard, we were named a Most Improved City, jumping from 65 out of the 100 top cities to number 42, thanks to our clean energy investments and work. And then the second one is utilizing a U.S. Department of Energy grant to stand up an electric vehicle car sharing and electric vehicle infrastructure, electric vehicle charging infrastructure at some affordable housing units here in Charlotte. So we will be implementing that grant throughout the next couple of years.
So I'm going to just do the last two slides, and Phil mentioned this in the beginning. A companion document to the CEAP report this year will be our first energy performance benchmarking report. You all adopted the Sustainable Facilities Policy revised in January, and as part of that, this was a key piece. So we're really excited to share with you this first report, which will allow us to look at our energy usage compared to buildings with similar use characteristics, and really against ourselves, and showcase that we have a commitment as a city, and that we really hope that other city building owners in the Charlotte community will join us. So my hope, Chair Ajmira and committee, is that we can actually talk a little bit more about this at a future committee meeting. So I'll just wrap it up here and say that we have made some significant progress, and as a city, obviously, we have a role to play. Appreciate all of the support, City Council, and as you know, we've been a member of the American Cities Climate Challenge cohort of cities, over 25 cities who've been working to take climate action over the past several years. Recently, there was a report that came out that showed just how much those collective actions across Charlotte and the other 25 cities have had when it comes to an impact on carbon emissions. In fact, collectively, cities are on track to reduce emissions by 32% below the 2005 levels by 2025, which will actually beat the Paris Agreement goal. So I think it just shows that cities have a huge role to play. We obviously are a place where emissions are the highest, but we're also a place where innovation and action can happen and can really be scaled. So I will end this presentation on that note, and happy to answer any further questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Katie. Great report. Appreciate all the work that's been done. Certainly, we made great strides. And at the end of the day, a city will continue to do our part. However, it takes all of us to meet our larger goal for community and our larger goal to meet our Paris Agreement. So it's going to take all of us to drive less, use public transportation system, and do everything we can to make our environment sustainable for generations to come. So with that, Mr. Winston, Ms. Johnson, any questions before we move on to our second portion, which is the ADA update?
Yeah, I just got one question or request for future information. I know one of the questions about the vehicle kind of transition when we first adopted the CAP was, of course, we have a fleet of some vehicles that are difficult to transition off of, particularly our heavy-duty vehicles like solid waste services, fire, and some, Charlotte Water, street maintenance vehicles. Would love an update in the future about kind of where technology is now, kind of what we're thinking about now versus when we adopted. Is there anything that council can do or should be thinking about to empower staff to be able to continue to think inside or outside the whatever boxes exist or might be changing as quickly as technology. Technology moves faster than policy, so we want to make sure that we're trying to keep pushing that forward. So,
We would be happy to bring that back.
thank you.
Ms. Johnson?
Yeah, I just want to comment, great job. This is exciting. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Councilmember Ajmera mentioned to the public, there are things that we can all do that will affect the outcome. And she mentioned drive less. Well, for some areas, because of the transit system, that's not possible. And I wanted to ask the experts, while you have the floor, is there any other suggestion that you can make to the public, that one thing that we can all do right now that would have an impact on the environment?
Well, Councilmember, go ahead, Chair
We
Ajmera.
had a list of things that at one of my town halls, when I did a sustainability town hall a couple of years ago, I had a list of things, and I'm happy to share that with everyone. But really, it had just basic things. Like, for an example, one was just if you don't use elevator, if you're able to take stairs, then do that, right? That saves energy and also gets a healthy workout in. Just one simple example. Second was really reusing, recycling. And needs to be a lot of education on recycling. And I know that county is doing investing into our education and what can be recycled, what cannot be recycled. But we can put that slide up at some point, Sarah, but feel free to share if there are other things that you think we can share with our community. And Ms. Johnson is absolutely correct. There are parts of our cities that do not have public transportation system. And that's why the council is working on this, our mobility plan, and that hopefully with our UDO, our 2040 plan, and with the mobility plan, we should have 10-minute neighborhoods where people can walk to grocery store, walk to work, or even take public transit. But I think that's where really the transportation transportation alone contributes largest chunk when it comes to our carbon pollution. So if we can get a handle on carbon pollution through public transit, public transportation, we can really meet our goals more aggressively. Sarah?
And I'm not looking, I wasn't trying to put anyone on the spot. I'm not looking for a report or anything. I was just thinking just a fun fact to educate the public. So if we had a list like that on our page, these are things that, that we can do or that you can do that will affect the environment.
Yeah, and actually, we do have a page like that that's available on the web. So what I can do is I can make sure you all have the link, and we can attach it to the next agenda, and we can make sure to circulate that information because you all made wonderful points. We're all in this together, and everybody has a role to play.
That would be great. Thanks. And maybe even put it in the Facebook chat today since we're discussing it. So just continually reminding all of us how we affect the planet. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. We all got to do our part. So second, Sarah, we have the ADA update.
We do. So Terry Bradley is going to walk us through that. But first, I believe that Victoria Johnson is going to kick it off. So I will hand it over to her.
Sounds great. I know Ms. Johnson is very passionate about this topic. She has raised this multiple times. So I'm sure Ms. Johnson will have a lot of questions. So let's get through the presentation first and save our questions so that we can get through this in a timely fashion.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Johnson.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. We, as far as the ADA, American Disability Act program, we're here also to talk about the transition plan, the city's transition plan. This is not, this is going to be a tag team presentation. Willie Ratchford from CRC and Terry Bradley, who's been doing the bulk of the work, and we're going to be here to go through it and also answer any questions that you may have to the best of our abilities at the end of the presentation or in between. Willie?
Thank you, Victoria. And once again, Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to allow us to update you on the city's ADA plan. We're going to do a couple of things this morning. One, I want to start off by reminding you of the importance of the Americans with Disabilities Act. It is a civil rights component of our work. And if you consider the fact that the city of Charlotte, like many communities across the country, are really big on equity these days, I think in order for us to have a truly comprehensive equity program, it requires that we also consider the rights of those residents and citizens in Charlotte who are also disabled. As a part of this update today, we're going to share with you some of the reasons that we think that the ADA is important, including, again, the fact that it is, in fact, that it is a civil rights that all of us should have. I have often said that everybody in this room, and indeed everybody in the city, should be interested in protecting ADA and making sure that it is implemented in the correct way, because all of us want to live a nice, long life. And if you live long enough, I guarantee you, eventually, all of us will be disabled at some point, and we want something that will protect us in our old age and in the way that others should be protected right now. We will also talk about the obligations of the city of Charlotte under the Title II of ADA, which requires that we, as government, make sure that the resources and the programs that we have here in the city of Charlotte are accessible to everyone regardless of their physical ability. One of the more important components of the Americans with Disabilities Act is the requirement that we as the city have a transition plan, meaning that we're going to transition from being a city that may not be in compliance with all of those components of Title II to one that is, in fact, in compliance with our obligations under Title II. And Terry will talk more about that a little later on in the presentation. We will share with you some of the ideas that we have regarding planning, the progress that we've had here to date, including an update on what has happened with the consultant that we've hired to assist us with this work. And then we will also share with you the approach that we have in mind to move the city's ADA program forward. As you can see in the slide here in the bottom left, we talk about ADA being a civil rights law. In the same way that Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Title VIII of the 1968 Civil Rights Act, which protects against discrimination against employment and housing, respectively. ADA protects against discrimination based upon disabilities. And so we feel that ADA is equally as important as employment and housing. It provides for social justice, equity, and inclusion within the city of Charlotte. And again, that's something that we've talked about lately that we are interested in. It is also a connection to good paying jobs over time. It is about public safety, and it is about providing a community where residents can work, play, learn, and retire comfortably over time. And we'll turn this over now to Terry, who will give us a little bit of background and then some of the report on the work that we've done over the past several years.
Thank you, Willie. Good morning, Madam Chair and council members. This is going to be a brief update on where we are with regards to the ADA work that we've been doing. We've met with you guys a couple of times and just wanted to make sure that you are kept in the loop around the work that we're doing. The first part of the presentation is just giving you a little bit of the background. As Willie has indicated, this work around ADA is a federal civil rights law that was enacted back in 1990. And the city of Charlotte has been working with regards to making the city of Charlotte ADA compliant since then. We started off this work probably in 1991, where we had a response from the federal mandate to do this work. And at that point in time, this work started off as, let's check off the boxes as this is the work that we need to be doing. There wasn't really a focused cultural shift in thinking around it. We just wanted to make sure that we were adhering to the federal mandate. The Department of Justice requires that government agencies conduct a self-evaluation of its facilities, programs, services, and activities, its policies and procedures. And we've done that over the years. In 2018, the city of Charlotte decided we wanted to be a little bit more comprehensive in our approach to the ADA, and we started the planning process to begin that work. The ADA transition plan is a self-evaluation. The city is required to create a transition plan to address and identify barriers. The transition plans identifies physical barriers, the remedies to remove those barriers, the cost that may be associated with it, when it's going to be done, and who's responsible for it. This also, it serves as the city's guiding document, and we'll be using this transition plan to kind of guide our work for the next 15 years and beyond. So with that, we felt that a lot of the departments doing this work, they were operating independently, and we wanted to be more comprehensive with regards to doing this. So we hired a contractor to do this work to help us with this, so we can all be on the same page. And we hired Altua Solutions back in 2019. Timeline of events that have taken place since 2018 starts with council approved a budget to do this ADA work back in 2018. With Altura Solutions being the awarded contractor to do this work, they did an assessment. They also started public outreach. In 2020, the assessment was still ongoing, collecting data, collecting information, finding out where the barriers were, what facilities we needed to look at. And we actually looked at all of our city-owned buildings on unoccupied city properties. In 2021, we made a presentation to council to kind of update everyone as to where we were with regards to this work. The ADA transition plan at that point in time was at 85% complete. We were still collecting information from the public as well at this time, and we wanted to make sure that the city departments had input on what was happening with this work as well. So what we were doing was taking the 85% draft, going back to the departments, and making sure it accurately reflected their departments. If there were some transitions or some nuances that were different that the consultant didn't know, now was the time we were going to make those changes. Moving on to 2022, we now have 100% draft, and we're making a presentation to this committee today. But the plans are that the departments will still look at the documents and the work that we have, but the city manager will also want the full city council to look at it, the transition plan, and approve that plan at some point. Engagement around this work has been very deliberate. It's a requirement of the ADA transition plan that you have public input and it really only requires that you have one opportunity to do so. But we went over just to make sure we were collecting as much information as we could, as opposed to having it a document that just had government influence. We wanted to make sure the community had input as well. We had our first open house in May of 2019. We had our Partners Disability Right and Resources assisting us with that open house, just to make sure we had members of the disability communities chiming in. Then the second open house we held was in November of 2019. And our partners, Goodwill Industries, was a part of that process. From May of 2019 to August 2019, we had an online survey, which would also allow an opportunity for those who did not or could not get to a physical location, or their time during work might have been a factor. This portal allowed another opportunity to get input as well. And from that, we had about 180 responses after that survey went online. In August of 2021, we're still we have the draft online for still more input from the community, and that is still online as of today. So we can make sure that people can still provide input. And the goal is we would have the 100% draft to replace this current draft online, that will live online moving forward, so people can kind of see what work has been going on. What the ADA transition plan includes is the following. It includes the city facilities, public right-of-way, our sidewalks, city staffing and programs, the city website, and city services. Again, what was included in the assessment was between January 2019 and September 2021, we assessed about 175 facilities. We have looked at programs, services, and activities, and we analyzed about 1,500 different program services and activities. The improvements that this assessment found were, we're probably going to look at adjusting heights of counters, replacing door handles, drinking fountains, installing new ramps, adjusting slopes and existing sidewalks and surfaces, and eliminating the obstructions of pathways on the sidewalks. Now, we're going to also have the implementation team, and Victoria can talk a little bit about that.
So how we plan to work the implementation of the transition plan is that, as you see on the screen, these departments are the ones that will be heavily involved. CATS, aviation, they are already working this arena due to federal funding, and they are required by law. So they will be a part of the team to help us make sure that we're doing it right, help us make sure that we understand what it is that, with their expertise, what the government expects moving forward. We have CRC, ADA part, we have budget because of the funding. Corporate communication will be playing a very large part because of the website outward facing to ensure that we're meeting compliance. Charlotte Water, CDOT will have a lot because we're talking about roads, sidewalks, and different areas as their work continue and as past works have occurred. General services, with all the facilities in which we have, the consultant have looked at, they will play a large part in which they've already started doing the work. All of these departments have in some way or form, but really doing the work in order to meet that ADA compliance aspect of it, and the city manager's office. The implementation team will ensure that we all know what is going on at any given time, so we can actually house this information in one place, and that it's just not piecemeal, that it's cohesive and it's making sense. And when we're called, if anyone called to access, we have the understanding, and all the departments have the understanding. And while other departments are not listed, that does not mean they do not have a role. That just means that they don't have a very large role, but they do have a role and they will have an ADA liaison or someone to help them navigate those roads as these issues pop up and it relates to their work area going forward.
So, thank you. So our next steps, work has been identified and is already underway as a transition plan is in the finalization and implementation strategy is developed. The things that they're working on right now are website improvements, sidewalk improvements, CATS bus stop improvements, and facility improvements. That work has been going on and is continuously moving forward. So our steps will be that the council will receive this transition plan for endorsement and provide an annual status report. That report would be outwardly facing on the website, and we will update it every year moving forward. So just to summarize and close us out, providing access for our disabled community is Charlotte's responsibility under the Title II. The city has made progress over the last several years to meet our requirements, but work is ongoing. The goal is to meet and exceed requirements by instituting best practices, shifting the culture within the organization itself by having everyone understand that it's everyone's responsibility, not just a mandate, but it's more about making sure that everyone is doing their part to ensure that everyone is protected. The ADA transition plan recommendations are in keeping with the city's staff's commitment to serving the public. It shows the city's commitment to protecting everyone's civil rights, and it elevates the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Charlotte can lead and provide an example. Staff looks forward to sharing progress with council on an annual basis. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Mr. Bradley, for the presentation. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. A great update. This was very educational for me. Ms. Johnson?
How did you know? Oh, here I am. Hold on, I'm sorry, I lost you guys for a second. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the work that you're doing. I just wanted to clarify the dates. You said in 2019 there were some open houses and presentations. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And has there been any outreach since 2019 to, I know you said there's the survey, but has there been any intentional or focused outreach to the communities or to the advocates to get feedback?
Yes, we as we looked at it, we started in 2019 with several open houses, but we moved to having an online portal to get that feedback. And that way, if anyone had limited capacity to actually go to a location to where we had the open houses, they had access online to do the surveys. And that work was also in 2020, and we still have the draft of, which includes some of the reportings that we, or feedback that we received, and it allows our opportunity to still continue to get feedback.
So how long is the report open for feedback before the final recommendation is made to council?
So Councilwoman, Member Johnson, just for clarification, this is a very fluid report. While we are going to take feedback at the given time, as this evolves, we're not going to be cut off of feedback because of the different outreach and communities that work in this area. We're going to be constantly looking for feedbacks and communicating back and forth so we can make sure that we're continuing to work in the area and in the way that is conducive to the people that we're trying to accommodate.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for that. And this is also a link, if you all can post this on Facebook so that individuals are aware. This is so important. I'd be remiss, I'm an advocate for disabled and specifically an advocate for brain injury awareness. This is March, it's Brain Injury Awareness Month, and the city council will be observing brain injury awareness for the third year on March 28th. And we also have support from several of the businesses downtown. They're going to be lighting their buildings in the color of green and blue for brain injury awareness. That's going to be done next Monday, and also there might be some this Monday. So I'm just excited. Additionally, I asked the last time that this was presented about ASL interpreters in city council public meetings. Can you give an update on that, or where we are with that?
So right now, what we have asked is that on a couple of occasions, we would like ASL sign language interpreters to be present, and that's usually during a press conference, which is an urgent matter, and also if you're having some type of emergency situation that occurs. We also have asked that if City Council could start having sign language interpreters at meetings, that they would like to, they could also consider that as well. But when we talk to the Disability Rights Advocacy Council meetings, they say it's more of those urgent situations that they would prefer to see that happen. And that's when we're actually required to have those meetings happen. If you have community meetings, it would be another opportunity. But those are the two, I guess, areas that we really focus on, which is a press conference or an emergency meeting that we're having.
And as this take hold, we
Yeah.
as we get further along, hopefully budgetary aspects of it will allow for it to be at the actual meeting. But, you know, it's a transition plan, and as we grow and we get better at it, then that could be a possibility that will be at the council meetings.
I appreciate that because, and Mr. Bradley touched on this, the closed caption is not the language that the hearing impaired speak. So I think we are excluding, we're excluding members of the public who absolutely hearing impaired or rely on ASL. So I think the fact that we know that, I've also heard from the Disability Caucus who's pushing for that statewide. So I hope that that is a part of the goals for the city.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Thank you for your passion. I know you serve this community. Long before you started serving on city council and your nonprofit work. Thank you. So I think this is an item that might come up at our budget meeting. So committee members keep an eye on this because this is truly an equity concern that, as Councilmember Johnson have brought this up multiple times. So we'll be watching this item pretty closely as budget discussions continue. Mr. Winston, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Radford mentioned that all of us at some point in time may encounter a disability. It kind of got me thinking about current state of things. We also might find that we encounter new types of disabilities. Thinking of COVID, right? Thinking of how the legacy of a pandemic as we deal with issues like long COVID, medium long COVID. I don't think we necessarily totally understand how that will impact our community. I do think about how folks do interact with local government, especially given the pandemic and how we depend on how the community at large depends on certain things. Just from a simple standpoint of, well, right now it seems like a simple standpoint of having virtual meetings, for instance, and being able to be virtually present and participate, right? This was something that was not necessarily able to be done under the law prior to the pandemic, but because we are an emergency state, we're able to continue that. We probably won't be an emergency state forever, but is there maybe a lens that we should be looking at from an ADA perspective on how we, for instance, structure our meetings, how we provide access I don't know. I don't know what what the ask is, but can we be cognizant, specific to COVID disabilities, but future thinking, how we kind of update that, you know?
And Councilmember Wilson and Mr. Bradley jump in. I think as we move forward with our transition plans, things that we probably never thought of will come to light. For one, I always joke with Terry, till I was in a wheelchair before back surgery, I didn't understand about not opening the doors until I couldn't, and I was like screaming and going, and realized I just couldn't do it. And like we said, we don't know the issues of long-term COVID. But as this transition and as we look at it cohesively, as the city as a whole, then those things will come to light and they will be addressed as we go forward.
And I don't know how that even, kind of puts a lens on internal stuff like HR, hiring, and obviously dealing with things like compensation and what. I know that's maybe a whole other different bucket of stuff, but, these are things we get asked about, and I imagine,
So
confluence of issues, yeah.
So as far as HR, I can say that they do make accommodations. If someone applied for a job and they're told in advance of disability that something, whether it's an interpreter or something else or anything else that they need to be accommodated on, those things are happening. That's why, as Terry was saying, Mr. Bradley was saying, we've been doing the work. We just haven't been doing it cohesively, and we haven't had it housed in a way that we can quickly access it. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're doing now, not trying. That is what we're working toward to build upon. So when those questions come up, all those answers will be located in one place.
If I might, please, and thank you for bringing that up. I think that is crucially important. And if we think about it, during this pandemic, we as city government, we spend a lot of energy and resources providing accessibility to able-bodied people. And if we put the same energy and time and effort into providing the same type of service for disabled people, this should be a piece of cake. We know we can do it because we've done it on a very large scale already. Just a matter of paring it down some, but we can do it. It's about commitment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ratchford. Great discussion on this. This brings to our next topic, which is very important, equity in governance framework. So everything we do, if we are looking at it from equity perspective, I know we have only 20 minutes left. So if my colleagues are okay staying a little bit longer to get through the equity in governance framework, it is a very important topic. We can get through that presentation. So, Ms. Johnson, I know you have a question. Do you want to ask now, or do you want to wait till we get through this last presentation?
No, this is very simple. I just want to say two things. When we talk about being intentional with this, I've received the information that it would only take an additional $100,000 in the budget to have an ASL interpreter at the meetings. I think that, the money that we spend, I think that that's minimal to be able to engage everyone and meet those ADA requirements. And also, when you talk about long-term effects from COVID, brain fog and brain injury is one of them. So I just wanted to bring that awareness, and thank you for the discussion. Thank you.
A great point, because we do have Phil Rieger here from our budget. So I'm sure Phil is taking notes. You hear council members' passion here, and certainly this is an important issue that many of us are passionate about addressing to ensure that we are equitable.
Once a budget director.
Yeah, so make sure as the budget discussions continue, this might come up. But let's move forward with our equity and governance framework.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon again to members of the committee. I will. Oh, okay. So just want to be able to afford everyone an update on the information that was shared at our last meeting, considering the feedback that was provided from you all. And again, thankful for all your input. I think it's gotten us to a place where we have some really robust things to share today. So again, the goal is to provide provide what we've constructed based on the feedback that you have offered. Our hope is that this will then, in turn, move to full council. So we talked about using an equity lens, and I'm excited to show you all our rough draft of what a framework could look like. Again, this is taking based on the information that we offered to you all and the feedback that we received back. Again, this is constructed demonstrating the interconnectedness of all the areas. Each area is interdependent one to the other, and each stakeholder holds a unique role in this process. In terms of council and specifically around this committee, we really want to hone in on policy. Recognizing that decision-making process and utilizing an equity lens through that process is of the utmost importance because it keeps the other two areas, as you see in this slide, going. Resources and investments are key throughout. It is incumbent on us to properly resource the work that we hope to do. Those boxes on the bottom are really our goals. Again, based on what you all have shared and what we've heard consistently from members of council around trying to address those inequities and those disproportionate impacts that we as a community have consistently had over time. If we move one step further, we go to our approach. So again, we have a framework, but it's important to denote what our approach is. And in order to achieve our stated goals, our joint efforts to accomplish the priorities you all have set are truly important. And so looking at those priorities and marrying that to the core approaches of using data, intentional outreach and engagement, strategic partnerships, and sharing accountability will help us get to equitable and thriving communities, help us to build upon the efforts that are occurring outside of this body and with other bodies in our community. So applying an equity lens, as you see at the beginning there, in the form of the camera outline, is really utilizing all the approaches that we've put forward to further enable us to build those communities that are referenced there at the end. So you all asked, specifically Councilmember Johnson, I heard the need for a tool, a checklist, if you will, to guide what the work that you all would be doing in the policy space specifically. And so the checklist we're developing really has to do with these questions. They would serve as so this tool would serve as a structure for institutionalizing the considerations of racial equity. It would create both a product and a process because it produces a forecast of the anticipated impact of impending decisions. It utilizes an analytical approach that engages communities that are most impacted by racial disparities. These are some of the questions we already use, but we have not captured it all in one place. And so that checklist, a great idea that was presented, really allows us to capture that all in one document. I'm curious, and I'd love to leave this to the end, but what questions do you all already ask yourselves that may be captured here? What questions do you ask yourselves that aren't captured here? What should we include? Again, there's an importance here around disaggregated data, and we do have some pieces of disaggregated data that we would have to go deeper in, and we hope that through partnerships with community-based organizations, other governments, including Mecklenburg County and the school system, and qualitative data that we would receive from community members, we'll be able to hone in even deeper on answers to these questions as we look at policies and proposals. We talked a good bit about engagement, and we wanted to make sure to look at 3 specific items related to engagement and bring those before you all as a potential framework. So you all have an immense amount of insight and guidance available to you through through the boards and commissions of City Council. And there are many of those boards and commissions that are aligned to the utilization of an equity lens. And so we would want to pull on those groups to best ascertain where are the potholes, where are the benefits, where are the things that we can move forward. You already have those individuals accessible. and ready to provide guidance to you as a committee. We also want to partner with community-based organizations for feedback, and I want to give kudos and credit to my colleague, Willie Ratchford. He was able to put together a comprehensive list of community-based organizations that we can turn to seek feedback on specific topics and issues as they arise. Also, we have the Equity Steering Team, which is an internal-facing team, but there are overlaps into how the internal work faces it externally and deals with our residents and community members. And so we'd want to see where those overlaps lie and how we can best address the issues that arise in those spaces for our community members. I also want to just take a second to share that in this space around engagement, we would really want to work closely with our partners at Mecklenburg County. They've done a great deal of work in this space, have just formulated a report on systematic racism that we've been able to talk through collaboration opportunities. They also just hired a new chief equity officer that I've had an opportunity to connect with and plan on having continued strategic sessions with. So again, my question to you all is, are we on the right path? Is this reflective of what was shared in the last meeting? Is there anything that's missing? Our hope is to take the information that is shared, that you all are happy with, to finalize our draft framework and eventually share it with full council, and then move forward the engagement strategy so that we ensure that we have outside voices that could help us refine the framework and tool. With that, I'd love to hear any questions or comments you all have.
Thank you, Mr. Rios. Great presentation. Can we go back to the slide where you have the checklist questions? I think that is very important, where we provide feedback to you all as to if there is anything else that we should consider. So I'll just use an example, transportation. When we look at our transportation, such as Blue Line, or now that we are talking about the Silver Line, certainly it provides mobility options, but it does, it has come at a cost of displacement and gentrification. So we got to look at if certain policy or adopting a mobility plan would affect communities of color, how do we mitigate that? So I think if we can somehow weave that into our equity lens tool, where we are minimizing or mitigating the impact one proposal would have. So I think transportation is a great example for us to look at as we are developing this equity lens tool. So I think one question to that point, one question I would add, how can we mitigate the impact of, how can we mitigate negative impact of a proposal that we know it's going to have on communities? So that one question, if we can add to our checklist, but this is a great start. This is really a great start, Mr. Rios. Thank you so much for putting this together. And I also like your recommendation. If you go back to, if you go to next slide where you got the equity steering team, because none of us on council or even all of us combined do not know how certain policies or if you're missing anyone. So that's why we need to be very intentional about who we engage in this important discussion. So having an equity steering team would be very important part of this, building out this overall framework. So that's where I look to Mr. Ratchford and his team, and even Mr. Bradley, to ensure that we are being intentional about being intentional about reaching out to all stakeholders. That would be crucial to building out this framework. So Mr. Ratchford, I look forward to working with you on building out this team who can guide us along the way. Ms. Johnson, followed by Mr. Winston. Madam Vice Chair?
Thank you. I think this is a great start. Also, the one thing that jumps out to me is looking at geography. There's so many times when we see a presentation, such as, the solar, and I can't remember what meeting we were in. I think it was sidewalks. And the illustration of the disparities was just so obvious. So I just think if we're asking the questions, is this proposal or is this implementation or whatever that project is being implemented throughout the city? So when we talk about intentionality, again, if we're making sure that all areas are receiving those benefits, I just think that that's one thing that we really want to be conscious of. We know there's a crescent and a wedge. So if we're just looking at things from a citywide perspective in everything that we do, I think that it will help us. Another thing, and this is kind of to piggyback off what Councilmember Ajmira said, we hear the term unintended consequences so often. I think we should work to remove that term as much as we can because, we are a council. You guys are the experts and experienced in what we do. And if we really take a look at our policies and our practices from an equitable perspective, we can almost hopefully eliminate that term from our vocabulary. Yeah, I agree with the equity steering team. I would say that we do want individuals from the disability community to be a part of that, and just think of the populations, make sure it's racial equity and just all of that. Make sure we have individuals from all populations in the city. So I think this is a great start. I think that just talking about it is a huge step. So thank you for your work on this. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. I'd just like to step in for a second here to share. Our community-based work would be focused with the organizations that are mentioned in that second bullet. The Equity Steering Team is a group that already has been stood up and exists internally. So it's made up of staff and mostly high-level staff that is working to address all of the equity issues that we have as an organization. And in so doing, we end up seeing that there are challenges that we deal with internally that end up being affecting individuals in our community. And so we would take the information that they gather to help us better understand that from the perspective of staff and be able to mitigate those challenges as you have already expressed.
And to Mr. Rios, to follow up on that, I thought Equity Steering Team was made up of staff and outside stakeholders, such as someone from Disability Caucus, someone from AARP. So is there an advisory team that we can put together who can guide us along the process and provide feedback along the way? Because that is very important as we're developing this equity framework.
We are absolutely open to reviewing that. Again, as we get information back from the community-based organizations and the team that's currently stood up, we definitely would want to gather that info and then make a determination or bring it to you all for a determination from there.
Yes, I think I would certainly insist on having some sort of advisory group as we move forward with this framework, because this is a huge undertaking where we are looking at everything from equity perspective. And we want to be very intentional that we are getting direct feedback from organizations who work in this space every day, such as Disability Caucus, AARP, and so many other organizations. So I would like us to have some sort of advisory board. It's great to have partner with community-based organizations. We want to have advisory board along the way where they are providing direct feedback to the committee and staff. Ms. Johnson and Mr. Winston, how do you feel about that?
I agree totally.
Mr. Winston?
Thank you. I definitely would love to hear what feedback staff comes back with to that point. I'd like to go to the slide just before this one. I think there's a workflow, or actually the equity and governance approach. I think there's a workflow missing between using an equity lens and council priorities. I think that's council responsibilities, because council priorities can change over time, but there are certain responsibilities that are always going to be there, right? We always have to build roads. We always have to pick up the trash. We always have to deal with land use. There are certain things that are never going to, we've had to deal with community safety, but how future councils prioritize certain approaches definitely can and will change. You hope, I don't think any of us are taking these jobs to stay in a constant state. We want to be in a place that changes, but I want to be able to put an equity lens on things, right? Forever until we fix this problem. And with that said, I think if you start to look at those council responsibilities, I think there are other questions that need to be asked as it relates to the lens of tool development and those guiding questions. Because I don't really see any questions. I see a lot of questions here that are forward-looking, but not many questions that necessarily look back. How do you repair some of how do you repair some of the inequities that we created because of the way we have been handling our responsibilities? Transportation is an excellent thing to think about, right? We've built roads that have displaced people, that have moved folks away. How can we look at the fragility that has created in those neighborhoods? And we can identify some of those people as well, and those communities and those entities. How do we make them less fragile moving forward? But on the other hand, some of those things have also created equities, right? When you look at urban renewal, there were quite a number of small businesses that were either created or sustained through policies like that, both black, white, upper middle class, lower middle class, and beyond. A lot of businesses have been created out of that, which those legacies are some of the community partners that we rely on today. So how do we understand when we do some of those things, right? How do we understand when we think of environmental justice, right? When we put certain neighborhoods in certain areas where folks are sicker, right? How do we maybe we might want to move neighborhoods, right? We want to make sure that more housing isn't built in certain areas. Well, that might have one of those unintended consequences of further destabilizing those communities that have made do, right? So how do we make sure that those changes that we kind of put on are not making those folks that we intend to help in a more fragile situation? How do we repair that situation that we created? How do we understand, again, going back to transportation, where we put certain communities near faster roads and there's more traffic fatalities and deaths? How do we get in there and fix that right now, not just think about how we build new roads in the future that don't exist better? That's important too, but until we repair those policies that we have, again, under council responsibility, and I know some of that might get into departmental strategy, but it all starts with council's policy around the budget, right? What do we invest in? How do we determine when we're going budget cycle to budget cycle? How do we prioritize that? How do we put that equity lens on understanding why it's important or why we might want to take money away from certain areas without it being a feeling? How do we have a data-informed approach. And it also, that will help us, that shared accountability, you know, on the other side of that kind of framework that Mr. Rios has of explaining to our constituents, right, why these decisions are being made this way that might seem counterintuitive because, again, they're not necessarily looking at the decisions of this body and in the weeds approach that has to do with our council responsibilities. So if that made sense, you know.
Thank you, Mr. Winston.
If I might, Councilwoman Ashmira,
Yes.
I wanted to commend Councilman Braxton on what he has just said, and he is right on target. This is important because if you think about the move across many states, including here in North Carolina, to around this anti-critical race theory, which is to pretend that this stuff didn't happen years ago, or not to acknowledge it anymore. If we don't know how we got here, then we're not going to be able to fix present-day inequities simply by just going after. We can't approach it the same way that men approach going to the doctor, and that is, if I just ignore it long enough, it's going to go away. It doesn't work that way. We've got to acknowledge that it happened, and it's only then that we will have the capacity to actually begin to fix it moving forward. And I'll leave it at that.
No, absolutely, absolutely. We got to acknowledge our past and accept what has happened and work from there to create a better future. I completely agree. I know that it's 11:34. I know some of my colleagues might have other commitments, so I just want to be mindful of everyone's time here, including staff's time. So, Councilmember Johnson, Councilmember Winston, are you okay with staying a little bit longer? It looks like we're almost done with this last agenda item.
I do have another commitment, but I just want to say, if we're looking at this slide, I know these are council priorities, but one area that I think that we could really look at through an equitable lens is economic development and how we are recruiting employers. We can, if we look at that geographically, but also the questions that we're asking, and I've brought this up before, you know, what is the average salary? And I think we need to look at that differently. You know, if the CEO makes $100,000 and the frontline employee makes 10, and it can be reported that the average salary is $50,000. So if we really want to bridge the gap and help residents become more upwardly mobile, while we can't require, you know, what employers pay their employees, those employers that we are assisting and that we're using taxpayer dollars to recruit or incentivize, I think we can ask the questions and make this a part of the policy. What's the average salary for your front line employees? So I think that we, as we're recruiting employees, I think it's an opportunity to really help assist our current Charlotte residents. Those kind of questions, and I know they've come up before. How many Charlotteans are you hiring? And I know we're working towards that, but I think that ED part piece is huge. We could also look at the TIGs that are being provided. You know, let's look at those from an equitable perspective. Is there an incentive for employers to move to some of the corridors of opportunity? So I just think that the economic development and the business recruitment piece is a huge area that we can apply an equitable lens and impact our residents here in the city.
Yes, and I think, Mr. Rios, correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't that be covered under Hire Charlotte that you have at the bottom? And we also have corridors of opportunity section here, but we can. So, Mr. Rios, could you just respond to Ms. Johnson's question?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. The Higher Charlotte area of council priorities would be the area that focuses in on economic development, its policies and practices.
Got it. Okay, great. Okay, so looks like we, anything else that we have left? All right. Well, a lot to think about, a lot to do, but this is a great start, Mr. Rios, and I look forward to providing. Do you need an action today from this committee?
Chair Ajmira, based on this conversation, I think we got some good feedback. I heard a strong focus on data-informed approach, some additions to this equity and governance approach to also make sure that we're including some of the core work and foundational work of the city. So my suggestion would be that y'all give us 1 more month to spend a little bit of time with this and come back, and then you look to moving that forward to council at the next meeting. Because there's some changes and some things I think we need to work through. I wouldn't want to ask you to move this forward, and we wouldn't have another time to check in.
Sounds great. So based on today's feedback, you heard from Ms. Johnson, her feedback on economic development, Mr. Winston's point about recognizing the past, acknowledging the wrongs that have been done, and then building a better future from there. Also ensuring that we are being intentional about community feedback, specifically from groups that will be affected. So where equity in governance framework, it's really being intentional about everything we do. So having feedback from various groups such as Disability Caucus, AARP, and some other groups, and having that advisory team helping us along the way. All of this feedback, certainly I look forward to looking at our next presentation with incorporating some of this feedback.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify a little bit about my point. Acknowledgement is definitely one aspect of this, but I think the main point that I was trying to get at is repairing, a reparative function of our equity lens that works to undo the harm that our specific policies that and our actions have created in carrying out our responsibilities. So the only way that we can do that is to have a back-looking way of the way we build roads, the way we do economic development, the way we do land use, the way we did or didn't look at environmental justice. So that reparative function and action of a lens on our policy is very important. Acknowledgement is an aspect of it, but I don't want it to stop there.
Absolutely, and I think that's how we develop equity framework, is to look at the past, but then also how do we repair and also mitigate some of the impacts. Like I use the transportation example, so mitigating. So all of this feedback, I think staff has taken note of all of it, and I look forward to our second presentation on this topic before we discuss this as a full council. So with that, I don't have anything else. Sarah, did I miss anything? Anything else that we need to add before we adjourn for the day?
I think we're good on our end.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you all later for the council meeting.